The Last Free Man. Chapter 5. A Plan in Motion. We don't sleep that night. Ren works the console, scanning for any breadcrumbs that might lead us to Vale's location. The feed is a dead end. No identifiers, no coordinates, just a closed-loop system Harmony has hidden deep. I pace the room, my mind racing. This changes everything. The truth was enough to shake the foundation. But a living, breathing Evelyn Vale, that's enough to shatter it. If we get her out, if we survive long enough to tell the world. Sable breaks the silence. So what's the move? I glance at Arik. He already knows. We find her, he says, and we break her out. Ren exhales sharply. It's not that simple. She pulls up the encryption logs, layers of protection, dozens. This is next-level security, she mutters. Whatever facility she's in, it's so classified that not even Harmony's own system can access it directly. Sable frowns. Then how did we see the feed? Ren taps the screen. Because someone wanted us to. A chill rolls down my spine. I step closer. You think this was intentional? She nods. It's a closed system, but it's not isolated. Someone inside is running this loop. Someone inside wants us to see her. Arik's expression darkens. That means two things. One, we have an ally inside Harmony. I swallow. And two, he meets my gaze. It's a trap. The room goes still. Sable runs a hand through her hair. Fantastic. I rub my temples, thinking, if this is a trap, that means Harmony already knows we're looking. They expect us to come for her. Which means they don't think we can succeed. That's our advantage. I take a slow breath. Trap or not, we don't have a choice. Ren's hands tighten into fists. Even if I break the encryption, even if we pinpoint her location, we're walking into the most secure place in the city. Arik nods, which is why we don't just walk in. He turns to me. We tear down the walls first. Tearing down the walls? Arik makes it sound simple. It's not. Ren keeps her eyes on the console, fingers tapping out sequences I don't recognize. Sable leans against the rusted terminal, arms crossed. Arik stands still, waiting. I exhale. So how do we do this? Arik doesn't hesitate. We hit their control centers. Harmony's security is layered, surveillance, enforcement, and infrastructure all tied together. We disrupt enough of it, and we force them to reallocate resources. Sable nods. Stretch them thin, make them vulnerable. Ren frowns. That's not enough. We need them blind. She types another command, pulling up a schematic of Neo-Eden's security grid. The glowing lines pulse with activity, a network that watches everything. Ren points to 3 key locations. Surveillance hub, enforcement control, data nexus. I stare at the map, the pillars of Harmony's power. Surveillance sees everything. Enforcement responds instantly. Data nexus erases anything that shouldn't exist. Sable whistles. You're talking about taking down 3 of the most secure sites in the city. Arik nods. Not all at once. We stagger the attacks, cause chaos, make them scramble. While they're patching the damage, we go for Vale. I press my fingers against my temple. This is insane, but it's the only chance we have. Ren tightens her jaw. We'll need people. Arik doesn't flinch. We have them. I glance between them. Who? Sable grins. You think we're the only ones who hate Harmony? She's right. There are others. People living in the cracks of this so-called utopia. People who remember a world before. People Harmony has tried to erase. I nod. How long do we have? Arik checks his watch. 24 hours. I feel the weight of it settle on my shoulders. One day. One day to prepare for the single greatest act of defiance Neo-Eden has ever seen. No turning back now. One day. That's all the time we have to turn this suicidal mission into something that might actually work. Ren keeps working the console, hunting for a vulnerability, a gap, anything we can use to track the live feed back to Vale's location. Sable starts making calls, reaching out to contacts in the underground, smugglers, engineers, old defectors from Harmony's security forces, people willing to fight. And Arik? He sharpens his knife. Literally. I watch him from across the room, the methodical movement of the blade against the whetstone. There's a calm in him I don't understand. You really think we can pull this off? I ask. He doesn't look up. I think we don't have a choice. Ren exhales sharply. Got something. We all turn toward her. She taps the screen, pulling up a fragmented location stamp buried deep in the video data. It's encoded, but part of it leaked through. I can't get exact coordinates, but... She zooms in, isolating a cluster of numbers. This is a sector reference. I step closer. Where? She hesitates. Sector 1. Silence. Even Sable stops talking. Sector 1. The heart of Harmony's regime, where the ruling elite live, where enforcers are bred, where nothing moves without Vale's approval. Except Vale isn't in charge. She's the prisoner. Sable mutters a curse. That's impossible. Arik's voice is cold. No, it's not. It's the safest place to keep her. I feel a weight settle in my gut. They didn't just erase Vale. They locked her inside the very city she built. Ren's fingers tighten on the keyboard. We're not getting in through brute force. Not there. We need a way inside. Quietly. Arik nods. Then we get someone on the inside. I frown. How? Anyone with clearance in Sector 1 is already loyal to Harmony. Sable grins. Not necessarily. I don't like the look in her eyes. She leans forward, resting her elbows on the table. I know a guy. Arik raises a brow. You always know a guy. This one's different. She taps a finger against the table. He's a ghost, a fixer, someone who makes things happen in the upper districts without leaving a trail. I fold my arms. And you trust him? Sable smirks. Not even a little. I sigh. Great. Arik leans back. Doesn't matter. If he can get us into Sector 1, we meet him. Sable nods. I'll set it up. Ren exhales. We're really doing this. I meet her gaze. We have to. She nods once. Then she types the final command, sealing our path forward. Sable's contact was late. That was either a very bad sign or a very good one. We waited in the back of an abandoned transport bay, deep in the lower levels of Neo-Eden's old infrastructure. The walls here were covered in layers of peeling paint, relics of an era long before the city became what it was now. Overhead, rusted ventilation ducts dripped with condensation, sending faint echoes through the cavernous space. I checked my chrono. 2 minutes past the meeting time. Sable leaned against a rusted cargo crate, arms crossed, completely unbothered. Relax, Professor. I wasn't relaxed. Arik stood near the entrance, posture rigid, his eyes scanning the darkness for any movement. Ren had her tablet in hand, running last-minute encryption checks, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, a figure stepped out of the shadows. The man who appeared was tall, dressed in the loose, layered fashion of the upper districts. He wore a hood pulled low over his face, but I could still make out the faint glow of a neural interface node at his temple, a high-end model, something only the elite had access to. "Tell me this isn't a setup," Arik murmured, low enough for only me to hear. Sable pushed off the crate, smirking. "No faith, Ren?" The man approached casually, hands in his pockets. Then, just as smoothly, he reached into his coat and produced a small data slate. He held it up between two fingers, tilting his head slightly. "No names," he said. "No guarantees." Sable stepped forward and plucked the slate from his hand, not bothering to check it first. "And no nonsense." He gave a dry chuckle. "You always were fun." I glanced at Arik. His expression didn't change, but I could see the way his fingers tensed slightly at his side. He didn't trust this guy. Neither did I. Sable turned the slate over in her hands before tossing it to Ren. She caught it easily and immediately started pulling up the data. The man watched, clearly waiting. After a moment, Ren nodded. "This is legit." Arik exhaled sharply. "Then let's talk." The man smiled. "Oh, I'm already doing you a favor. You want into Sector 1? That's a lot of doors to open." Sable smirked. "Lucky for us, you're the guy with the keys." He tapped a finger against his temple. "I have access routes, but nothing's free." Arik's voice was ice. "We're not bargaining." The man sighed. "No imagination. You're just going to storm in there like it's an action holovid? You need subtlety." Sable folded her arms. "Then tell us how to get inside." He hesitated for a second. Just a second. But it was enough. "Sector 1's citadel is a fortress," he said finally. "There's no sneaking in, not without clearance." Arik exhaled. "And you have that." The man grinned. "I have access to the medical transport network. It's the only way into Sector 1 that isn't locked to Harmony enforcers or high clearance officials." I frowned. "Medical?" The man's grin widened. "Every high-level Harmony official undergoes routine biometric screenings. It's a system built to ensure compliance. The transport network runs patients in and out daily. If you're inside one of those convoys, you're in." Sable's smirk returned. "Now we're talking." Arik wasn't convinced. "You want us to sneak into Harmony's most secure zone inside a convoy full of their own personnel?" His voice was flat. "That's insane." The man shrugged. "Not my problem." I saw it in Arik's posture. He wanted to shut this down, but I also saw something else. He knew we didn't have a better way in. I took a slow breath. "What do you want in return?" The man's smile returned. "Just a favor." Arik immediately shook his head. "No deals." Sable stepped in. "A favor like what?" The man turned to me. "You're a history guy, right?" I hesitated. "Yes." He tossed a data drive toward me. I caught it reflexively. "Find me something," he said. "Something that was erased. A name, a record, doesn't matter. You dig into the past for a living. Now do it for me." I didn't answer right away. Arik looked ready to shut it all down, but I made the call before he could. I tucked the drive into my coat. "Deal." The man's grin widened. "Smart choice." And just like that, Our way into Sector 1 was set. The team had a plan. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was the only shot we had. The medical transport network was our way in. It ran through Sector 1 like a lifeline, moving high-clearance officials in and out under the guise of routine health screenings. If we could slip into one of those convoys, we'd be inside the most fortified district in Neo-Aden without a single alarm going off. Arik didn't like it. "This is too clean," he muttered. "Nothing ever goes this smooth." I didn't argue. He was right. If we got caught, it wouldn't just be an execution. It would be a public display. Harmony made examples of people who challenged them, and yet, there was no turning back. 23 hours until extraction. Ren had spent the last hour in front of her console dissecting every inch of the transport network. It was an intricate web of routes, personnel rosters, and biometric security clearances. Sable paced behind her. "How tight is security on these convoys?" Ren didn't look up. "Tight enough that if we don't do this right, we'll be dead before we hit the checkpoint." I swallowed. "And if we do it right?" She finally glanced at me. "We'll only be mostly dead." Sable smirked. "I like those odds." Arik leaned over the console, studying the blueprints Ren had pulled up. "Best entry point?" he asked. She tapped the screen. A processing facility on the edge of Sector 3. The medical teams there ran final screenings before the convoys left for Sector 1. "That's our in," Ren said. "Every transport gets a last-minute crew rotation. If we intercept the right shift change, we swap in and get a free ride." Arik folded his arms. "And getting out?" Silence. Sable sighed. "One problem at a time." I looked at Ren. "Can you forge the credentials?" She nodded. "I can make us look legit on the records. But once we're inside, we're on our own." Arik exhaled sharply. "Then we better make it count." 17 hours until extraction. The warehouse was cold, damp, and smelled like rust. It was one of our safe houses, one of the last places Harmony hadn't wiped off the grid. Arik stood near the table, checking his weapons. Sable was doing the same. I had nothing to check. No weapons, no gear. Just my mind and a sinking feeling in my gut. I glanced at Ren. She wasn't prepping like the others. She was still at her terminal, pulling in live data feeds, monitoring patrol patterns. She caught me looking. "You nervous, Professor?" I gave a dry chuckle. "A little." Her gaze lingered on me for a second before she spoke. "Good," she said. "Means you're not an idiot." 8 hours until extraction. We split into 2 teams. Arik and Sable would secure the uniforms, a full set of scrubs and ID badges to match the transport crew. If we didn't look the part, this was over before it started. Ren and I had the harder job. We had to hijack the database. The real medtechs assigned to the convoy couldn't show up on shift logs, or the entire thing would fall apart. The terminal we needed was inside a Harmony medical hub, a heavily monitored site. We wouldn't be getting in with guns. This was a job for deception. And I wasn't sure I could pull it off. 2 hours until extraction. Ren and I walked through the front doors of the medical hub, dressed in pressed uniforms. I tried to match her confidence, but my heart was pounding. The Harmony officer at the checkpoint barely glanced at us. He waved a scanner over Ren's badge, nodded, and then turned to me. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Never seen you before," he said. I forced a casual shrug. "New transfer."
That's it for this chapter of The Last Free Man. If you're enjoying the story and want to see what happens next, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps get this audiobook out to more people. New chapters drop every week, so make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. You won't want to miss what's coming next. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think of the story so far. And if you know someone who would love this world, share this video with them. The Resistance needs all the help it can get. Until next time, stay free.